Welcome back everybody to another BenguFarm training video. And in today's video we're going to talk about the XR5000 integration and how to do drafting. Now this is a question we get many times and clients think it's very difficult. If you do it the wrong way, it's difficult. And today we're going to learn you a very easy way to do drafting, and this is our suggestion to all our clients. So keep on watching and we show you. So it's quite common for a client to think that the data on which the drafting is based must be on the XR5000. So for example, if you want to draft by the number of expected lambs a ewe will have, you think that the pregnancy examination, the number of fetuses must be on the scale. If you want to draft by days since last lambing, you think that the previous lambing date needs to be on the scale. And that you can apply to any other data you base your selection on, and that will influence your drafting direction. This is absolutely not necessary to do that way. You can do it that way, but it's extremely difficult. In a way, you will need to set up your drafting rules on your XR5000. So what we promote to our clients is that you create drafting groups in your BenguFarm, and you will use the different functions in BenguFarm to add animals to that drafting groups, and then you will set up the drafting according to the drafting groups. So next time you do drafting, you don't have to set up the rules on your scale the second time. You will do it once, except if you want to change, for example, drafting on a scale and draft by weight, then you'll set up drafting on a weight-based rule. So our first step we're going to do is we're going to define our drafting groups, and for that we'll go to the movements menu and you'll go to move animals to another camp or group. We go here because this is a place where you can also create categories and groups to that categories. You can refer to our separate video about groups and grouping, but we're not going to go into the details in this video. So to add a new category, you'll click on this button, add, edit and remove categories, and we'll click on the plus to add another category. And we're going to call this draft, and we can give it a name XR5000 drafting groups. And we're going to also mark this that the animal can only be in one subgroup of this category. You cannot draft in two directions at once, so animal can only be in one draft group at a time. This will become more clear with the next step. So we save our changes, exit here, and at your categories, your draft groups will now be added. And now we're gonna add the different directions. Depending on what drafter you have, if you're a 3-way or a 5-way drafter, you'll set up 3 or 5 groups. We're going to say we've got a 5-way drafter, and we're going to start with BR for draft back right hand side. Skip to a video when we entered all of them. Okay, so now we created all our groups. We've got the draft back right, draft front right, draft straight, draft front left, and draft back left. Let's save our changes and exit here. Now you can use the different functions in BenguFarm to move animals to these groups. We can, just as example, do it from this screen. Say we want to draft certain animals to the back right. We can go and select them here and throw them over to the other side. Again, refer to our video about groups and camps, where this functions on this screen will be explained in more detail. Or you can say we want to select those 4 animals and we want to add them. When we want to draft back left hand side, a couple of other animals, and so forth and so forth. So we're going to put the animals in the groups where we want to go and draft them at the end of the day. Another powerful way to do selections for your drafting is by using your herd layout. And here we want to point you to one of our other training videos where we cover the herd layout and topics such as the filtering of data, the sorting of data, selection, highlighting of data, and setting up different views for different scenarios that you can use, and other topics are covered. For this example, we know that we had a second sharing and we want to draft on fiber diameter. So I'll go and sort on fiber diameter and say all the fiber diameters above 33 and above. So select the first one, the last one. I use my selection buttons, that's everywhere in BenguFarm. And we select all of them in between. Now I can say this selection of animals must be linked to a group. I want to link them to the draft category of groups, and I want to put them in the draft straight group. Now you have the option to say add animals to the group, or you want to empty the group first. So if you're busy with selections, for new drafting, you want to clear the previous animals which were in that draft groups. Otherwise, if those old animals are walking over the scale, they'll still be drafted in the old direction because that is how their data is still in your BenguFarm. If you already started with setting up your selections and you only want to add animals to the existing groups, you'll select add. In this example, I'm going to say empty group first and I save them. These 22 animals are now in the draft straight group. We deselect all of them and say the other group I want to do is below 53 but above 30. Let's just scroll up till we get our first 30, which is that one. And again, I'm going to select in between, link them to a group. I link them to category of draft groups and say, for example, I want to draft them front right. I already did selections at the other place for front right, so I just want to add these animals to the existing selection of animals in a group. So it should be clear to you that you can do selections from different screens in BenguFarm. Many of the screens have link animals to group function. For example, your My Reports have functions like that, and many of your input screens have functions like that, where you can make selections of animals on different screens and add them to the draft groups. I'm just going to save it. So those 69 animals is now added to that. And you can continue on this trend. I'm just going to deselect my selection and just as a pure example, and say we want to look at our last weight of the animal. It's maybe not a great example, but just to demonstrate what you can do is I do that selection and I'm going to link them to a group draft, but I also want to add them to a draft straight group. So the animals with those last previous weight and the fiber diameter of above 53 is both going to go straight through your drafter. I'm going to add them to a group because I don't want to remove the ones with a fiber diameter of 33 and above. And we save it. Okay, so this is just examples of how selections are being done. You can refer to the BenguFarm help manual and other videos of how you can do selections in BenguFarm. So our next step would be is to go to our XR5000 scale integration screen. And what we want to do here is to add a field on the scale that is linked to these drafting groups. Please watch our separate video of setting up scale field links. So we're going to add a field, and it's going to be one of our group fields because we're adding a group. And I'm going to put it as live data because we want to write data to the scale. Remember from a previous video that with session data, we can't write any data to the scale. And I want to add the draft groups. I'm going to give this field a name and let's just call it BenguFarm drafting. So BenguFarm drafting will be created on the scale and it would be linked to our XR5000 drafting groups that we set up. So you can just say update scale fields. So this field is now created. Our next step now would be is to select all our animals and to write them to the scale. Again, watch our video of updating and deleting animals to the scale for more details. I did select all of the animals and then I'm going to say export the animals to the scale. So where the animals are in certain drafting groups, that data will now be written to the scale. And that data then we're going to use on the scale to set up our drafting in our next step. Okay, so our data is now written to the scale. So our next step would be to set up the drafting on the scale itself. Our final step, we're going to set up the drafting on the scale. Apologies for our screen, it got broken and we hadn't fixed it yet. So on your scale, you go to your settings menu, then you go to drafting. You'll just wait a second or two for the screen to open. And you're going to go on change other draft settings. On the screen that appear, you can just click on next. And this is the important screen here. It says sort animals by. And it's very important here to select the middle field that says other single criteria. And here you want to select the BenguFarm drafting group that we created in BenguFarm and in which subgroups we divided the animal. So you'll select BenguFarm drafting, say next. You select the amount of ways you want to split the animal. That will depend on your drafter. If it's a 3 by a 5-way drafter, say next and next again, and another next and finish. Then this screen will appear, and this is where everything comes together. So we selected a single criteria of a value in BenguFarm drafting. So where BenguFarm drafting is equal to draft back left, when we want to draft back left. If it's equal to draft front left, we want to draft front left. If it's equal to draft straight, we want to draft straight. If it's equal to draft front right, we want to draft front right. And where BenguFarm drafting is equal to draft back right, we want to draft back right. You'll say recalculate draft. And what your scale will do now is it will go through the data of all the animals and look at the BenguFarm drafting fields. We divided the animals into the 5 different ways in our example, and depending on the value of each animal, the drafting direction will be calculated. And that is how the drafting is set up. So now when your animals walk over the scale will look at the value in a drafting field and draft according to that in the 5 or 3 different directions. So next time you want to draft, you'll clean your drafting groups in BenguFarm and again from the start do your selections and put the animals in the different groups. And then you write all your animals again to your scale. You don't have to change the settings on your scale for the drafting because we set it up once, and it will still work on drafting groups and according to the values of the drafting groups. That's it. Thank you for watching and see you next time.